Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We're about to start in like 2 minutes.
On the
Or
technical,
like 1 minute.
the data person does.
First of all, ladies and I would like to thank all of you for coming in and making time on a Friday morning. We have some breakfast and beverages outside. If you need additional sugar, we also have candy on the tables. Except that table, I ate all the candy earlier today. Again, I'm Yuri Pujols. I'm the Executive Director of North Hudson Campus. And my partner is Lisa Williams. She's the Director of Faculty and Staff Development. With our co-chairs of PAC Day, we're very excited to have you here today. One of the items that you're going to find in front of you is an agenda. We listed everything that we're going to be doing today. And namely, is going to be reviewing some of the slides of the information that we released a few weeks ago. Namely the results of the climate survey, right? After that, we're going to have a couple of activities that would help us hone in that information and hopefully get all of your input and your perspectives into it, so we can bring it back and use it in our committee. So before we start, again, I introduced Elisa. I also would like to introduce Jan Scanlon. Jan, if you don't mind saying hello. He's the Executive Director of Institutional Research and Planning. He's going to be here, help us explaining the data element that there might be a question or an issue with. Also would like to thank Dr. Weaver, Dr. Friedman, and Paul Gardner for being here today. Now, in addition to all of those individuals that I mentioned, I also have to recognize the members of PAC Day. They're 35 strong. And all the work that happens behind the scenes, they're the ones that essentially get to do it. And the information that we collect today, and on the other two forums, they'll be the ones working with it. I also wanted to give you an update of where we are, very briefly. As you know, the DEI work started at Hudson County Community College from the York College Council, and they appointed like a subcommittee, and I know that Mr. Lowe was the co-chair of that, and I saw him earlier. Jose, are you here? The task of that subcommittee was to develop, they did the research, identified a vendor for the climate survey. The president appointed the PAC Day, the membership of the PAC Day. They work on finalize the work on the climate survey. We released it. We sent you a lot of information, and we reformatted the results when we received them from the vendor to make sure that they were comprehensive. Originally, they were 400 pages. When we crunched them down, there was still over 100 pages. But you had them over, you had a chance to look at them, to review them, to see what's essential. And today we're going to be looking at some of the information because we only have like an hour and a half. We don't have 4 hours. And this is where we are today. We're going to be having this open forums, this one and others, to discuss about the surveys, make sure that we get your input, because this effort is everybody's effort. It's not one group or whoever is in that committee, not that 35, it's everybody, right? What we intend to do is use your input to settle on priorities that we want to work on, and ultimately make them operational. And now we're going to look at the results. My partner.
Thank you, Yuris. The first thing we want to look at when we look at our results and want to draw your attention to here is the recruitment. And when the survey was launched and it was administered and we got people's feedback and viewpoints, the question came up, why do people come to Hudson County Community College? Yeah, and if you look at this slide here, what you see there, and again, these are results that were sent to you. You had them in your emails. If you didn't get a chance to read them over, I would definitely recommend that you do. But what we see here is that we see that student diversity, when we look at for administrators, why they come to work here, we see that there is a strong feeling about student diversity, campus commitment to diversity. Also, we see faculty diversity and administrator diversity and staff diversity, among other reasons that an administrator. The same thing when we look at faculty. We see some similarities there. Right there, 17% of the people that answered the questions, yes sir, faculty, yes help me, yeah, student diversity, faculty diversity. And again, campus commitment to diversity and administrative diversity. If you look down the scale, while at the top though, at the top reasons why faculty want to come work here, and these slides all show a strong viewpoint of how people feel that diversity is here at Hudson.
So the little thing that we're going to do to help Lalisa out right now is that these are visualizations of data, and what we're looking for is anything that strays away from a main block. So not every page is going to look just like this. There are some other types of bar graphs and some other types of visualizations. So what'll be interesting, and what I would ask everybody in the audience to do, is look for where are the significant variations? Where are we starting to see that there's actual real interest that's different from some of the other areas that are presented on each slide? And those then become things to think about where we could have an impact if we had an initiative through DEI where we were putting resources and time and effort into making an effect in an area. So the visualization and the color gives you a chance for your eye to be drawn to things that are variations, variances, or things that, let me look at that for a second. And wanted to point that out.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Freeman, for pointing that out. Same thing when we look at the responses from staff as well. We can see that some of the key reasons that staff are here, why people come to Hudson. Again, people come and student diversity, employee diversity, campus commitment to diversity, staff diversity. These are some of the main reasons why people are here, which is very positive. So we want to continue to build on that. And then when we look at this slide, we can even see that with students, we see a lot of green, but now we're starting to see other colors come into play. So what I'm going to do right here is call up our Institutional Research and Planning Executive Director, John Scanlon, that can talk a little bit about the colors.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. A lot of our slides are in this format. If you remember from the survey, there were these banks of questions on a particular theme, and then you had to rate the questions, usually on a 5-point scale. Some of them were agree to disagree. This one, for example, is very important to not at all important. And so when we decided how to visualize them, we did it in this color coding, where the idea is that green is good, red is bad. It's a way visually to see quickly what the sort of general trends in the data for any particular item are. I just want to point out a couple of things to you. One is, beside each item, it's hard to see in this one, there's a label that says N. That means that's the number of people who responded to that particular item. Then there's a mean score. And that just means, if you think of, in this example, very important is 5 and not at all important is 1, that means the average score for that question, let's say the question number 1 was 4.44, so it's just a way to see what the sort of overall trend for the question is, and the responses are always sorted in descending order by that mean. 2 more things to point out. In a couple of examples, and spoiler alert, we'll look at this later in the presentation, there are questions where if you're agreeing, for example, to the answer, that's actually a bad thing. So there was a question like, I want to quit my job. If you agree to that, that's bad. So in those examples, we had to reverse the scale, because otherwise looking at the results like this would give you the wrong impression. So you'll see in some of the questions, for example, not at all important might be green instead of red. So you just have to pay attention to that reversible scale. And finally, something that we all noticed, and here's a perfect example, there's often a lot of neutral responses to questions, even to questions where you don't think, how could you possibly have a neutral response to, do I like the college or not, or do I want to quit my job or not? And one of the things that's occurred to us is that neutral might actually be a proxy for something more interesting, like, I don't know, or I have another thought about this that wasn't in the range of responses. And some of that came out in the written responses, but I think thinking about maybe the next time we administer a survey like this, we might want to think about how we handle those neutral responses. There we go.
Well, thank you, John, for talking about that. And it is important that we have these surveys. It's important that all of you took the time to show up here today, because it's showing that what your behavior is matching the data. that this is something that people care about, this is something people are interested in. But when we look at the student, we see that there's a lot of green with students, so that means that it's very important to them. Student diversity, campus commitment to diversity again, and faculty diversity, so that's important. And now I'm going to call up my co-chairperson, Yuris Pujols, to talk about the next set of data.
So, demographics and belonging, who's coming here? And when we ask the question, we specifically ask, are you a member of this group? And then we ask a set of questions, right, to determine certain input. So this one specifically deals with gender identity. Are you a member of the LGBTQIA community? You have yes respondents, and as John explained, I believe there were 30 people that answered, and based on that, these are the responses that you have. So you have, again, a lot of green, and that's good. I was very impressed, very happy to see that. One of the areas that it seems that we need a little bit of improvement is on in the pack day. This response was kind of continuous, like maybe we're not as representative in some of the other groups. So we're going to go back and look into that and review that. Again, gender identity. So there's a situation, a lot of green, everything there kind of registered 35%. Yes, of course.
Just one, my goal is to be listening and not talking, but I just wanted to note I was interested in the fact that if you look at the proportion of responses in terms of identifying as LGBTQ, on this one it's about 10%, and on the other one it's about 17.5%. So those are, if those are generalizable to our community, much higher than what is believed to be the proportion in the larger society.
Thank you, Chris. And just to point out, the first one was employees trustee, the second one was students. Like we got one theme and we put both the slides together. Employees of color, this is the information that we provided, same set of questions. You see that consistency there. There was this perception that maybe the PAC day is not representative of that, but overall it's good, you know, and the higher up you go, then it kind of decreases a bit. Students of color, very happy to see that students of color, it was very consistent, very close to 80%. To what extent do you disagree with the following statements? This is for employees with disabilities. And that's an area that we've taken on. I know that we had a couple of consultants come on campus assess our facilities and our services. So I'm sure that whatever work comes out of this, you could inform that.
So as we're seeing all this data and we're trying to think, well, is there anything of significance for me to think about when I'm going to do my table exercise and actually talk about key initiatives that I would recommend forward? You're starting to see a little bit, you're starting to see in a visual like this, my eye gets drawn to employees with a disability are treated with respect by administrators. So what's up when you start getting 10, 20, 30% between the neutral, the disagree, and the strongly disagree? Is there a need in disability, or what we're calling accessibility services, to what does that mean, respect by administrators? Is there not enough visibility on the support that we give? Is there not enough focus? So what I'm doing just by taking the mic is trying to show you what's happening inside my head. Like, the colors are bringing me to the question, and then I'm thinking about the question and what is this little bit of variance? Because we're starting to see variance in a couple of places. Here, we're starting to see a little bit of variance that, guides us a little bit, and there have been so many conversations around accessibility services lately. Not a strong variance. I mean, the really great story here, and John keeps reminding me, is that there's a lot of sea of green, just seas of green, that people think we're doing really well in a lot of places. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. And as we continue again with the student, again, I was very happy to see that the student experience was very consistent, pretty high up there. 38 people answered, and again, students with disability. That there's certainly a lot of work to be done, or some work to be done, but, this is encouraging information, I think. This one we included as well to make sure that we included the cohorts that we're responding on, but the veterans, the sample was really small. Like we had 7 individuals that responded, and that's not a significant sample, but again, some of the themes are consistent with the others. And ironically enough, the number for students, we have 7 students, veterans that responded as well. But again, a very, very small sample. But it seems to me that the student response are usually consistently a little higher than, which is good. That's what we're here for, right? And I'll pass it on to my partner in crime, Elisa, to talk about policy and processes. I'm sorry, I'm serious.
Should have 3 hands and not 2. So when we look at policies and processes here at Hudson County Community College, again, the viewpoints, what we see is that from all of the data, and as you saw from what you got in your emails, it's a lot. It was a lot. So how do we drill down and pull out things that just kept jumping out and coming together, sort of like in a focused way? And one was that we saw that looking at employees and trustees, we found that there is a strong desire for people and viewpoint for people to have more mandatory training here at Hudson County Community College, and mandatory diversity training. And we see that it's across the board, and they strongly agree that there should be more training for at all levels of leadership, administrative, screening committees, faculty, trustees, staff members, and inside contract services. No one is really left out of that group. And so that's one of the reasons that, having PAC Day and having, all of you here to confirm this and, give your opinions, we'll know what to work on, so that we're not just working on something that we think will be good, we're not just working on something that we think will be effective, but we're looking at the data. And that's why I'm thankful to have, John Scanlon and Dr. Friedman and Dr. Reber to remind us that it is important that we look at the data. And we see the same thing when we heard from students, some similar types of viewpoints. Out of the 339 students that decided to answer this question, very few people did skip. And what do we see? That people feel very, very strongly. They strongly agree, or either they agree. We see fewer people being neutral and disagreeing with the fact that we should have mandatory training. And I think that speaks to the whole concept of policies and processes. And so now I'm going to bring up Dr. Friedman, and he's going to go a little bit deeper.
So one of the things that I see across the country too is that, some colleges want to see, and they'll set a goal for when they redo the survey. They want to see that the percentage of people that strongly agree about a particular set of services, for example, rises. So there'll be some particular actions and initiatives that take place to increase the results under strongly agree in a particular area. So in some colleges, they set goals across all operating areas, and that's one of the things to think about too.
And that will be a few words.
I have a question regarding the strongly disagree. Were there any comments to note that were surprising or outliers why there's even a percentage that says disagree that training should be mandatory?
Yes, there is, and we're going to talk about that after we go through all the slides.
Yeah, very briefly, in the written comments, there was a big proportion of respondents that mentioned, okay, we don't need to push diversity, there's no need for diversity, and I'm thinking that those respondents are probably the same group that responded similar and consistent in that area. But please.
And the last in this category, we look at employee screening committees. So when we talk about some policies and procedures to help with diversity training, to help with recruitment and things in other areas like that, we can see that the responses now, the screen is a bit more colorful. We see more red coming in when we look at these questions, when we look at this question, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements regarding the search and screening committee that's in your department or part of the departmental process here? And that's where, you know, I kind of circled like all the comments over there to kind of highlight, but you know, it's important that we have search committees. That's what this slide is showing, that people do feel, because they strongly disagree, that they're comfortable with the way we have screening and search committees, that they have a viewpoint to say we should do something about it. And I think that's what I take away from this slide and what our committee is looking at. And that it should be a part of our regular policies and procedures, which it is a part of our policies and procedures to have search committees. But how are we doing all that we can to make sure that with the search committee and the screenings, that the processes are fair to everyone, and that there's opportunities for everyone to be included.
Something, Lalisa,
Yeah.
something I noticed about this one
Yes.
is that there are a lot more people who didn't answer it, that they just skipped it rather than answer it. And I would think that's something to wonder why. Okay.
Exactly. And you know, that's a good question. So our ongoing work, we only have an hour and a half here today, but our ongoing work will be to drill down and to drill down and to drill down. Eventually, you know, over time, we will have drilled down to every single comment. And so you all are here and we want to make sure we know that. But thank you for that question.
And very briefly, I just wanted to point out that based on our processes of screening committees, the screening committees are diverse, and that's pretty high, right? But from that point on, as we include diversity, is there a diversity person? Is there a diversity statement? Is there a diversity policy? You see that the respondents go towards the red. So maybe there's some room for improvement there. And I believe that the concern that you're raising speaks specifically to what Jan mentioned about maybe we should have had an I don't know option there that should probably should connect.
And this also represents people's viewpoints. These are what people's viewpoints are, what people's their opinions are. And when we do the survey again, we'll give people more opportunity and hopefully encourage more people to participate. And maybe there'll be another option for an answer. But now we're going to turn it over and look at the data from how is the campus a welcoming place.
Thank you, partner. This specific area, again, it talks to the sea of green that we spoke about earlier. If you talk about employees or trustees, everyone, and the number of respondents here is 269 employees. That's like a quarter of a population, is a really good sample. And the perception is that we are generally very welcome to all of those different groups. If you look at the students' responses, very similar. You know, a lot of it gets close to the 80 percentile mark, which is good. I was very happy to see that. But you know, if you wanted to go that very quickly, and students, the number of respondents were 391. Elisa, leadership.
Can we go back 2 slides?
Yes, sir.
The only reason I asked yours to go back is if you combine the not all welcoming, not very welcoming, and neutral, you do see at the bottom that there's starting to be something of interest and significance there, where there are some people feeling that we're not as welcoming as we could be to people with disabilities. So sometimes you'll see a chart and the green lines are all very similar, but you're starting to see movement there, and it could be a point of interest and discussion.
Thank you.
Another thing we focused in on is the leadership and institutional commitment. And what we see there, when we look at employees and our students, what we notice that there's a high positive responses that our institution does promote racial and cultural interaction between different groups. So some of the highest responses are with somewhat very well, and we also see that 282 people took the time to answer this question, and very few people did skip. So that I think is a positive for our campus. Also, when we look at students, we see that almost all of the students took time to answer this question. I think that's phenomenal. And we see there, and the most of their responses are for very well. That we have, this institution does promote racial and cultural interaction. And I think that's something to celebrate definitely for all the departments across the campus, student affairs, student activities, the book, whether it's the bookstore, whether it's, you know, where they eat lunch, their classes. So I really love that this is so positive. when we look at, again, back to the employee and trustees, how important, in your opinion, is promoting diversity and inclusion to the campus leadership? How well do we think all of the leadership, all of the administrative leaders, our board of trustees and different people, how important do we think it is to them? And again, most of the responses, mostly everyone answered that they think it's very important. I think that's very positive, and I think we're on the right road to building something that's even better. And when we look at students, we see something very, very similar. That is very, very important. Nearly almost every student took the time to answer that question. I think that speaks volumes. And now, on to, so that was real positive. I took you up on a high, so I'm going to see if viewers can keep you there with experiencing and witnessing and reporting incidents.
Thank you so much, Elisa. This area was a little bit concerning because even though when you look at the quantitative data, a lot of it was green, a lot of it was positive, but when you looked at the comments and some of the other specifics, right? Reporting concerns and issues of bullying, harassment, and others was a little bit kind of like eye-opening to some extent. Like if you look at all of the respondents, 266 people, like a little bit over 50% say that they have seen or witnessed or heard none of the above. That means that roughly half of everybody else have, right? And it is broken down into very specific area. Bullying consistently came on top, and then it drills down to so many different areas. And that was also elaborated significantly in the written comments that I hope you were all able to look at. If you look at the student experience, it's significantly different. Almost 75%, almost 2/3 of them said that I've seen none of the, so that's a lot better, but it still implies that maybe a quarter of it have seen some of that. So there's work to be done. And again, bullying came on top, and then everything else was there. In the comment area, we know, we will very briefly talk about it, that a lot of people did not feel comfortable coming forward, like, oh, nothing's gonna get done, it doesn't matter, it really didn't affect me. And that might be an area of opportunity as well, like maybe we need to have some apparatus to encourage people to come forward and so on. So I would like to pass it on to my partner, Veronica, if you have a question.
My partner, Veronica. So one thing I noticed, the slide that Eric had you all go back to, aside from students with disabilities or people with disabilities, were undocumented students. That definitely showed a worrisome gap, so the third from the bottom. And then when you get to reporting, after bullying is people where English is not their first language, accents, so on and so forth. So definitely a connection there.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Veronica. And Elisa.
Now for just a couple of words about safety here, how safe do people feel here at Hudson County Community College. We look at these slides and what do we see? So again, it's all over the place. That's the way I see it. And in the wake of what has just happened here in our city, Jersey City, with people definitely taking advantage of other people in a real negative way, just the worst possible day could be for some people and groups of people in the whole community, even spreading into New York. And we did the survey before that happened, and I don't know what the responses would have been had we did the survey shortly after that. So I think that this survey gives us a clear picture to how most people were feeling here. So I'm glad that we were able to get it without that variable coming into factor. But we see that, for the most part, for employees, people said, I feel safe on campus. It's either they strongly agree or they agree. And we see little strongly disagree, but again, that just gives us the opportunity to improve that and make sure that everyone does feel that way. Employees, do they feel supported here? And we have programming that we're going to work on making sure everyone feels safe. Yes?
I'd just like to point out that 50% of the respondents of 269 people couldn't say they agree with feeling safe on campus or strongly agree with that. So my question then goes to how do we put visibility on all the things that we do to maintain a safe campus? Is it that things are in place but they're not visible enough? That would be some of my thinking connected to this.
And that is part of it, and we saw that when Captain Captain John Squigley, I think he's captain, but when he did the workshop at the All College Council just 2 days ago, he was pointing out the ALICE training, they went through what the ALICE training will do, what it can do. We also know that on our portal page, there are some instructions, there's some portal pages that there are different safety measures that are here that people may not know about or are able to take advantage of. I know, for instance, you may need an escort to get you to the parking lot if it's dark or if you feel unsafe. You can easily call security and they will help you with that. And just to wrap up the safety part, we can talk about this all day. We see that students, and that's important, we want to know how safe our students feel. We're glad you're in the room. We're glad the students are here today to represent for yourself, so we really appreciate and celebrate you for being here. But yeah, they feel how safe they feel. So we can talk about the numbers later. Now back to yours to talk about the overall climate of the campus.
When we review this data, this kind of was like the meat and potatoes of the results that we have, how generally people feel. And again, we looked at trustees and employees as well as students. And the general questions, I'm satisfied with my interaction with all the colleagues. That was pretty high. But then, as Dr. Friedman pointed out, you see a couple of patterns here and there, right? If you look at the student component, well, this is a continuation, I'm sorry. That was one of those slides that had like a lot of questions that you had to go from one page to the other. So we needed to make it like that. But this particular area here is very concerning. Again, to Dr. Friedman's point, there are a lot of areas here that essentially most people did not have an input as compared to agree or disagree. So those are items that we need to look at, right? Effective measures in place to reduce the amount of bias admissions placement. That's very important. This one specifically here, process of budgeting, and here this one is very campus diversity efforts have been recognized in awards, financial incentives, and so on. If you look at the student experience, consistency, it's pretty accurate there, right? That's a continuation of it. And that's a continuation of it. Employees trustee, to what extent do you agree or disagree, is there specifically to the job experience. You start, and I have to say, Jan Scanlon rearranges in a way to make it more comprehensive, that all the positive themes or responses were on top, and as you get the red and orange inking in, that was on the lower part. So you kind of see the trend moving a little bit towards the left, right? So you have that mentors and important to junior administration and faculty, right? I mean, there's a lot of information there. But again, same area here, a lot of areas with no input. And one of the areas here specifically, right? A merit and promotion process are fair and inclusive. I think that was a theme that we saw continuously throughout the results. Continue. I want to quit my job. That's what John Scanlon said earlier. He was reading it somewhere. So again, the question is written in a way, but the data was switched in a way that this is the positive response. So these are the people, unlike John Scanlon, who did not want to quit their job. And then, it moves down from there. The one area that I wanted to highlight that I feel that many people fare, it was, the hiring practice, that the workloads, paid, and over the last year, I feel that we've done so much improvements. We do have contracts. We've seen a lot of promotions college-wide, but based on these responses, there's still a lot of. And we want your input in the table activity that we have later today. I want you to be bold. This is an open process. We want this to be a transparent process, and be bold. Maybe we don't talk about salaries. Maybe we say, you know what, we need to work on salaries, but we also need a DEI office. We need someone specifically directing this work. Some of the areas, and very briefly again, for the sake of time, we couldn't go over all the comments, but we read them like a million times, Lisa and I. We came up with some consistency, some themes that we saw multiple people mention, and these were some of the takeaways, which essentially are consistent with the data that we review, right? requirements of clear path for reporting incidents. That goes back to the fact that a lot of people do not feel comfortable reporting. So we need to have something in place, some type of support mechanisms or advisory or whatever the situation might be. Pro support for campus-wide diversity. We see that. We saw that in all the data that we reviewed. More transparency for senior leadership was expressed. I mean, from my perspective, I think that's pretty obvious, right? We have town halls, we have a lot of other areas. This specific initiative, speaks to that, and the fact that all of us are here. More cultural awareness and activities. Maybe we need to have more activities that are specifically to certain groups to include the feeling of inclusiveness, right? Positive responses from students. There were some concerns about unfair work assignments. In some areas, it goes back to the bullying component that we talked about, and one of the things that we saw was part-time employees. They felt like we need to be more involved, we need to be more than that, So just, and need for more DI training programs to cover issues like workplace bullying and so on. But again, we share all the information with you, all is there. This is our best effort to put it out there, but everything is there for you to review.